Welcome back to Ask a Corner, the podcast where we answer questions people have always wanted to ask about death investigations. I'm Mark Hammond, the Boyd County Coroner,
I'm Bailey Rucker, Deputy Coroner.
and tonight this is episode 11.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into last week we covered cause and manner of death, and we kind of went over all that so everybody kind of understood what exactly happens. Today we're going to talk about death certificates, and the reason we're going to talk about that is I think there's a lot of people that have a lot of misconceptions about how a death certificate works.
Mhm.
They've never really had to deal with death, so they have no clue of how long it takes to get one and where to go and get it.
Mhm.
So we're going to talk about that this week.
Yeah. And that cause and manner of death that we were talking about, how we come to that determination is what really goes on the death certificate and what helps people with their insurance or with different things like that. And it's something that people, again, don't think about until they're faced with it, until they, get questioned, well, we need this death certificate to close out this account. So why is that death certificate so important?
That death certificate's like gold because they can't do anything unless they have the death certificate. So they can't go close a bank account out. They can't say if somebody is getting Medicare, Medicaid, they can't have that really turned off or stop payments until that happens. So it opens up the doors. Life insurance. The life insurance policy has to have that death certificate before they can do anything. And what a lot of people don't understand is that it has to be an official copy of the death certificate. So all those become extremely important when a death occurs. And I didn't know this. I mean, basically, I've filled out a lot of death certificates, but until you have somebody die in your family that's really close and you've got to be working that stuff, then it hits you, well, I need this I need a death certificate to do this, or I need a death certificate to do that. And I didn't really know that until that time.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's like that. It's the legal document that's gold at that time of death. And like you said, the life insurance policies, which is not something that I didn't even realize, is that can affect people's funeral home arrangements and everything. If somebody has a pre-made arrangement, does that change at all with, like, they have to have that death certificate before that can be closed out and stuff, right?
Well, yeah, and a lot of it is the simple fact they can do prearrangement and it's no big deal as far as most of those are already paid for. But if somebody has life insurance, it changes everything a lot of times. And what goes on that death certificate changes everything. That's why what we put on there is so important, not only to us, but the family. It follows a lot of things. Whatever goes on that death certificate, people that do medical coding, they'll understand this. If whatever is on that death certificate, that's how statistics are shown because each of those cause and manners also have a code through the medical side of it. And those codes are what gets distributed out to when you're looking at federal level and you're looking at trying to get statistics. That's where if you want to pull up how many suicides happen, that's where it comes from. And a lot of people don't understand that. They're thinking, okay, what happens behind the scenes? But the death certificate is so important to get grants. It's so important, not only, and we're not talking families now, we're talking, say, our office, as far as a coroner's office. If I'm trying to get a grant, those statistics come from what I put on a death certificate. The same way across the United States. The same way happens if right now in Boyd County, there's 2 job openings that just came open. I don't know if anybody saw those or not, but it's through the FIFCO district. And what those are for is an executive director for a drug rehab community thing. And the other one is it's an executive director and then it's a peer support person. So I saw those today come out. Well, how did they get those grants? Well, they went back and they pulled statistics and they really looked at statistics. Kentucky is big on that because we actually have violent statistics that operates out of, usually it's a branch out of UK. And then there's also people that are hired just in the ME's office to do nothing but that. And so they're calling all the time wanting our statistics. They want our coroner's reports, they want our death certificates, they want everything that they can get on that case, and it all gets dumped in to where they can continue to see trends that happen, things like that. That's what's so important about that.
So the main question of this episode is, what is a death certificate? So we know it's like an official state document, but to make it that legal record, what all is included on that for the person that's died?
So let's start off when somebody dies. When somebody dies, we have what's called a provisional form of death. That's like a temporary death certificate. And basically, on that, it has the date and time that they passed away, what county they died in, what county they reside in. It has the location of their death. It has who's going to sign their death certificate. And then it has a place for Network for Hope. A lot of people don't understand that anybody that dies in this state, by law, we have to call what's called Network for Hope. Network for Hope is um, organ donation, and that could be eyes, it could be skin, it could be bones, it could be a number of things, or it can be organs in general, depending on the circumstances behind the death, depending on how long they've died. There's a lot of things that do that, but we have to call them and we give them the information, who it is. They can pull up on a database to see if they're a donor or not. And then from there, we have to give them next of kin. Next of kin, in turn, then gets a call from them to where they can say yes or no. And then Network for Hope will call us back and say, okay, they're released to a funeral home or they're not. What goes on down through there is that provisional form of death follows them all the way to the point of if they're buried or if they're cremated. It follows them to what funeral home it is. So it has a lot of information on there that's already pertinent.
Mhm.
That is what I sign if there's a cremation, is the provisional form of death. So once somebody picks a funeral home, then the funeral home itself will start the death certificate. And at the top of that, it has a lot of information. It has the name, it has their age, their social security number, where they died, whether that was a facility, a roadway, it could be an ER for the hospital. There's probably 8 things going across the top of that that they have to choose. If they also have to put the location of death. So if it's a roadway, it may be US 23 and I-64 or whatever it is. That has to be on there at the top. Who gives them that information has to be on there. The mother and father's name of the deceased has to go on there. So there's a ton of different things that goes on the top of that. So the first top half of that is all demographics that the funeral home has to do.
Mm.
Then that goes electronically. Now, back when I started, we used a typewriter. I know that's hard to believe, and yeah, you're going to laugh about that.
I had a Barbie typewriter once.
but honestly, I had a typewriter, and and believe me, if you messed up, if there was one mark out of the way,
it was a
it
table
was
flip.
done. Yeah, you flip the table and start it again. So, matter of fact, I've got a typewriter out to the office that's still in the box because our other one wore out. And thank God, by the time I bought that typewriter, they went to digital. And I was so happy when it went to digital.
That's what you're going to make me use when I get grounded.
Exactly. Yeah. And well, the funny story is they are still funeral homes that we work with that will send a paper death certificate. Luckily, I can use a PDF thing to fill in that death certificate, or you're exactly right. Your punishment would be you use the typewriter. But and what it is they send that electronically now. Used to, they would bring us those, and it would be like you would have the death certificate. It'd be in a folder, so you would have a piece of paper, death certificate, and another piece of paper, because nothing could get on that. Nothing. And it was like if something got on it, it was bad for everybody because we had to start all over. Not only us, but the funeral homes.
Yeah.
So in turn, that gets sent to me electronically. I open that death certificate up and we look at that. If I see anything that's wrong with it, such as a name misspelling, which is big because here's the deal. if that name is misspelled and it goes to stop federal benefits, retirement, anything like that, then it gets kicked back to them because they're going to say the name doesn't match.
Mhm.
So I got to make sure everything is perfect. Uh, you can't say Bill on there if his name's William. So you got to use proper names. Everything has to be just right. And the good thing is if something is missing, I can easily click it and reject it, and I have to put in why. Yeah, a lot of times our rejections are names misspellings or like
Addresses.
addresses, the dates wrong.
Mhm.
Especially if we get a call and it's 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
A lot of times people will put the next day on there. Well, we have to kick that back. So we get all that, and once I'm good with that, then I get the bottom part. And the bottom part starts with the date of death, the time of death, whether a coroner was actually called. And then it looks, you have 4 lines for cause of death. And I can use one line or I can use all 4. And once that's done, then I pick the manner of it. So I can pick whether it be accidents, self harm for suicide.
Mhm.
There's several things I can put on there, like we talked about last week, homicide, or I can put on there that it's pending investigation. I put on there also it has a place for pre-existing illnesses that would have contributed to this death. Say somebody has a heart attack
Mhm.
and they've had a heart attack before, that goes on there. Prior myocardial infarction, um, maybe high blood pressure, so hypertension would go on there. It could be that they have COPD, and I have to spell out chronic obstructive pulmonary
Ugh, yeah.
disease. So you can't use abbreviations. Everything has to be spelled out.
Mhm.
So once all that's done, another part of that death certificate asks about did smoking contribute to the death? One of the things that on the fire service side is that we have tried several times to talk to vital statistics because firefighters die of cancer more than pretty much anybody.
Mhm.
And there's several different types of cancers that turns that death into a line of duty death. And so we're trying to get something on a death certificate that will actually say that it'll have a place that if their occupation was a firefighter, then another box would come up and we could say, okay, that it was whatever type of cancer. Now that's a line of duty death. So now the family would go back and actually get funds. They would get state funds as well as federal funding.
Mhm.
And because it would be considered line of duty, you're talking sometimes that's $250,000 that family would now be entitled to. The kids would be entitled to being able to go to a state college for free. So it opens the doors a lot of what you put on there. So then we drop on down, and if it is an accident compared to a natural death, it's pretty much done after that. We're good.
Yeah.
But if it's a homicide, if it's an accident, if it's an undetermined, then other boxes open up. They want to know the date of the injury or death. They want to know the time. They want to know if it was say a vehicle accident. They want to know if the person was a driver, a passenger, or where they were in the vehicle. Um, they want to know the location of where it happened, and then you type in what happened. So I have to type in that if it was a car wreck, if I would put the person was usually I'll write the decedent was a restrained or unrestrained driver. I'll put if they were under the influence of something or not.
Mhm.
And then I would put that, um, they struck whatever they struck and causing their death due to blunt force injuries.
Mhm.
Then I have to put underneath there, I have to put where that occurred. All that has to match. So what I put if I put something wrong that it occurred here and the funeral home puts something here, that death certificate gets rejected. That's happened a lot of times.
Yeah.
So there's fail safes in there. And after I do all that, then I save it and I hit the send button and boom, it goes. And when it goes to Vital Statistics, which are in Frankfurt. Frankfurt will review that death certificate from top to bottom. If they find anything out of the way with it, something's wrong, I misspelled something, anything like that, then it gets kicked back. Once it gets kicked back, it goes back to me or the funeral director, whichever one made the mistake. It has to be filled out again. And the neat thing is then is that it highlights what needs to happen, what needs to change, whatever it is. It could be just a small misspelling. But once that's done, then it goes back in again to get certified again. Every death certificate in the state of Kentucky is stamped with a number and it has a seal, and that number will follow it from here for 100 years for that matter. So that helps out tremendously.
So in terms of like things getting rejected and stuff, when it was back in the medieval times of the paper copies and everything was by snail mail, it takes a long time now to get like a full like final copy of a death certificate, especially for families. So like was there a chance that that took 10 times longer because of the snail mail and everything of the rejection process?
It did. It took at least 10 times longer because what would happen a lot of times is once it was done, we would call the funeral home, hey, this is done. They would come back by and pick that up. And a lot of funeral directors would drive to Frankfort with a stack of those and walk in and say, okay, I need to
Just
get
to
these
get 'em
certified
done.
just to
Yeah.
get them done. Because if not, you're waiting forever.
Yeah.
And if it gets to Frankfurt and something's wrong with it, then you're waiting 10 times longer after that.
Yeah.
So, and it's still a long time. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight by any means.
No, because still that part two from Frankfurt now to the funeral home of getting that final copy is still snail mail, right?
That is correct. Yes.
So yeah, so that part still
Yeah.
takes kind of a long, long time.
We get emails of like it's been approved
Uh-huh.
and we have an official number and things like that, but still the families are waiting and waiting. And it's like anything else. I mean, when you have to close accounts out and things like that, then you're waiting for a long period of time
Mhm.
sometimes, and you're sitting there calling every day going, why isn't this ready? Why
Yeah.
isn't this ready? And in turn, that's why I try to sign death certificates out twice a week.
Mhm.
That in turn makes sure that they get to Frankfurt, they get that done, and then it gets mailed. And you're right, it's snail mailed. So you're still looking probably another week out at least that it comes to the funeral home.
Mhm.
And then the funeral home is who distributes those death certificates. That's a big myth. A lot of people think, okay, he's got it signed out. Now I can go get things done. I'll go and get a copy. And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Because if you come and get our copies, they say draft across them in big letters. So it does you no good to get that.
Yeah. So now that we're staying kind of on the timing topic, a lot of families maybe have trouble with the fact that it does take so long because there is accounts that they have to close or just kind of knowing what really happened. They want that final question answered. So what are kind of some of the things that make that process even more drawn out than it typically is?
The first thing is if we do toxicology, and we do toxicology on everybody. So the first thing I tell a family is that the death certificate is at least 3 weeks out. Toxicology takes at least 2 weeks to get back. And that's quick. A lot of people's like, that's crazy. But in reality, if you go to different states, you're looking sometimes 6 months.
Yeah, we're kind of blessed that it only takes 2 to 3 weeks.
Oh yeah, we're really blessed. And we switched companies one time because that comes up on state contract about our toxicology. We switched to another toxicology company one time, and we went from 2 weeks or 3 weeks to taking 6 weeks to get those. When that happened, people were up in arms. And people were calling, going, why is this taking so long? And the answer was, waiting for the toxicology.
Yeah.
If somebody passes away, somebody dies tonight, we do toxicology. That toxicology is sent out tomorrow, and it is sitting at our lab, which is in Indianapolis, the next day. Everything is overnighted. So the toxicology getting to where it needs to go happens quick. And we went away, used to, when I first started this, we actually, and then you're talking 20 years ago, KSP did all of our toxicologies. It was right there in-house in Frankfurt.
Yeah.
and it still took 6 weeks sometimes to get a toxicology back. And so we decided that, or the state decided that it was better served to use forensic labs to do those.
Mhm.
And so there's a couple of those across the United States that happens, and you can always pretty much tell, you know, most states will use those labs, and you will know pretty much by the state of what they're using and everything. So it kind of keeps it kind of standardized.
Mhm.
That slows it up. The biggest thing besides that that slows it up is the simple fact of an autopsy.
Yeah.
And we're lucky. And a lot of people's like, we're not lucky, especially if you're all waiting for the autopsy. If the family's waiting for autopsy, they're not so lucky
Mhm.
because you're talking a minimum of 45 days. And most of our autopsies go longer than that. You got to figure, number one, forensic pathology. And we talked about this before, and you could probably throw statistics galore at that. But it takes a forensic pathologist to do an autopsy in Kentucky. And we used to have 4 different sites to do that. Over time, that's went way down.
Mhm.
Matter of fact, we were down to 1 site for about 6 or 8 months,
Mhm.
probably what, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, during COVID,
Yeah,
like in that stretch.
it was awful.
Yeah.
And so now we have at least 2 sites that are full time. They go 7 days a week, and you can take an autopsy to Frankfurt, or you can take an autopsy to Louisville, and it depends on what part of the state you're in of where you
Mhm.
go. They're working on opening up a another office in Northern Kentucky, which is used to have an office a long time ago. And then the fourth one was down in Madisonville, which is Western Kentucky. And from time to time, that office still opens up to where they can do autopsies down there without having to drive all the way to Louisville.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're talking, you're sitting in Paducah and you have to go to Louisville for an autopsy, you're talking hours on the
Yeah.
road
Well, I
just to get
mean,
up
it's
there.
2 hours for us, so if you can imagine going, it's at
Yeah.
least probably 3.
Yeah. It's at least a 3, 4 hour drive.
Yeah.
And so with us, it's 2 hours. We leave early in the morning. So we are very blessed that our fiscal court puts the money into our office, and other fiscal courts around the state, I can tell you right now, don't.
Mhm.
We have a full service office, we have a full morgue, we have a cooler, and a lot of people, I've heard it through the years, and this probably the last time I had anybody that ran against me, one of his big things was that that office was a waste of money. The cooler was a waste of money. It would never be used. And over the years, that cooler holds 15 bodies, and it's been full many times.
Yeah. I mean, we had
Uh,
9 like 2 days ago.
exactly. The other day, we had 9 people in there.
Mhm.
And so, we're in a different time. We're in a different time to where people can't pick a funeral home, mainly because of funding and
Mhm.
different things like that. And it makes it hard. And so, in turn, that body is kept there for quite a while, a lot of times, and that's a whole different subject. But when it goes for autopsy, depending on what happens, is depending on how long that death certificate takes. I've waited up to a year before to get a death certificate, but at the same time, that was a criminal case, and we wanted to make sure that we had the right diagnosis of what their cause and manner was before we tried to actually charge somebody with the death.
Mhm.
And once we had that, we did. It turned out it was a homicide, but they wanted to make sure things happened. And it's different testing. We had an adult that I waited for a death certificate probably 5 months for, and I kept on calling and calling and calling, and the cause of death happened to be a huge level of sodium in their system, which caused their death. That caused electrolytes imbalance, different
Mhm.
things like that. But in turn, I was very happy that it took so long, not for the family's sake, for my sake, because for the simple fact that that pathologist dug and dug and dug and ruled out everything else it could possibly be before it said, okay, this is the cause of death.
Yeah.
And that means a lot because you don't see that.
No.
You don't see that at all in other places. And Kentucky's lucky. We have a good number of forensic pathologists. If you go into other states, they have to bid on autopsies. Our coroner's offices across the state pay nothing for autopsy except to get them there. That's it. whatever it costs in gas and, whatever the person that is transporting that body charges, that's what you pay. The autopsy costs nothing. If you go into neighboring states around us, there's one state in particular that the coroner has to get on the phone and start calling. He has a list of pathologists, and they're calling, and basically the low bid gets it. And so you may make 10 phone calls before somebody agrees to even do it.
Yeah.
So that's bad. It's bad for the family. It's bad for everybody. And I'm glad Kentucky is not that way because I know 45 days sounds like a lot, but in turn, we have a better turnover and of getting that out and getting the cause and manner of death and getting the death certificate signed than a lot of states ever thought about doing.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about those few pathologists that are in the office and, like you said, exhausting all resources, spending days and nights ends to find that final answer, even when there's really nothing to go off of, they're doing that for every single county in Kentucky. And there's, again, 2 offices. I couldn't tell you the exact number of pathologists that are there, but it's not that many when you look at what, over 100 counties in Kentucky.
Yeah, 120 counties. So you got 120 counties that you're taking care of, and there's about 11,000 people die annually in this state that require our services. And then probably out of those, you could take 30% of that is what gets autopsied. Most of the time, that's around a couple of thousand. But when you look at that, that's astronomical numbers. There's a lot of times we go down and we try to be there first. We leave out early in the morning.
Get first in line.
We get down there to be first in line to get it done and get back here with the body. And in turn, there's sometimes that we walk in and they may be 6 people in front of us. And they may be 6 or 7 different cases and we're down there all day. So they put in long hours. And the neat thing is we have a very good working relationship with them to where we can get things done and in a timely manner and get back to the family the answers they need.
So another thing that we wait on, and sometimes we don't because the companies around us are, again, pretty good. We have a good working relationship, but medical records, we typically request medical records on everybody just so that we can paint that full picture.
Everybody that we work an active case on, that there's a case there, 2 things happen. They get a CASPER report, and a CASPER report is a report that we can run, and it tells us exactly what kind of narcotics you were on or you had got a prescription for and got those filled. But it's only in Kentucky. It's it limits us to where when we're a border state, people can go into Ohio, people
It's
can go
good
into West Virginia.
information to an extent.
But it gives us a piece, it paints that picture
Yeah.
like you said.
Yeah.
The second thing we get is medical records. So we email a request for medical records, and we usually get those back in a very timely manner. But again, where we sit as a border state, we're getting records over in Ohio, we're getting records in West Virginia, we're getting records in Kentucky, and we put all that puzzle together and then decide what we're going to do. Is that patient going to go for autopsy? Do we just need to do an external exam and we do toxicology and then we're done with it? So there's a lot of different things when it comes to that are pieces of the puzzle that we have standard operating procedures of this is what we do on every single case. And pretty much as long as we stay to those guidelines, I think that helps us tremendously trying to determine that cause and manner of death.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times I could write, heart disease on a death certificate, but truly, unless I do a toxicology, unless I do 4 or 5 other things that I need to look at, how can I say that?
Yeah, with no substantial evidence,
Exactly.
You got to have all the pertinent negatives too.
Well, a good example is we had a case not long ago, and the person fell off a deck, unresponsive, and worked into the hospital. And so we were like, okay, let's look at X-rays. Is anything broken vital that would have killed this person? We're talking, X-ray of the neck, X-ray of the head, do a CT of the head to see if there's no fractures, no bleeds, all this stuff. And so you rule all your trauma stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we do that? We do that because that's going to differentiate between an accidental death and a natural death. This turned out that it's going to be a natural death. We could have easily got that wrong if we haven't did everything that we needed to do and play our due diligence in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure that I'm 100% right when I sign that death certificate out.
And that's kind of like with the review process too. And the next question that I was going to ask, because you're not necessarily always the one that signs out the death certificate. Different doctors and physicians around here can sign out the death certificate if it occurs upstairs in the hospital. But you still have to review those cases to make sure that it truly was a natural death.
Yeah, and what happens is a lot of times we work cases backwards from the hospital, especially because a doctor will write on there that it was, say, respiratory failure, but as soon as they put it was respiratory failure due to, say, a fall, then it automatically kicks over to us. And then I get this death certificate and I'm going, okay, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
And then I talk to them and it's like, okay, now we're taking jurisdiction of that because now that fall made that an accident. So a doctor can sign out a death certificate as long as it's natural causes. Anything besides natural causes has to come to the coroner's office. And a lot of people don't understand that. But in turn, doctors are very good at what they do. But when it comes to making sure that the right order on a death certificate happens and things like that, and why it's so important, they're not that great at it because they don't.
It's not their specialty.
That's not their specialty, and they don't have the time to put into that. They know why. It's kind of like somebody that has a fall at home and they break a hip. They go into a nursing home now, and then while they're in the nursing home, they're very immobile. They can't get up, they can't move a lot. They throw a blood clot. Honestly, that when you look at that goes back to the blood clot, but it goes back because of the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to because they broke that hip,
Mm-hmm.
which in turn makes that an accident instead of a natural death.
Yeah.
So now things don't get coded right. Statistics don't get right. Families don't get the money they deserve. And then in turn, we did a disservice to the community as well as the family when we didn't handle that the way we needed to. So we always try to make sure that those are done the way they should be done. And we're going to see more of that. Kentucky's switching death certificates. And the new death certificate that they're going to will have a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
It will have a thing on there to where if it is keywords, if keywords are on that death certificate, it automatically gets kicked to a corner. And so you're going to see a lot more of that being caught and in the early stages to where we can do something about it and work it backwards and figure it out.
What about the cardiac arrest debacle?
Cardiac arrest is not a cause of death.
Mm-hmm.
And we see it on there all the time.
All the time. I think it is even in fine print. Do not put cardiac arrest.
Do not put cardiac arrest on this. But we see it all the time, and people put it on there.
Yeah.
And it's like that's the outcome. That's the outcome of whatever caused
everybody that dies is in cardiac arrest.
Yes, exactly. There's no way around that.
Yeah.
So, but you see it all the time. We do natural death forms, and we talked about that to where if it's not our case, this natural death form comes in, and we see it from everywhere. Cardiac arrest, and it's like, okay, let's look at medical history and figure this out because it becomes important.
Okay, so moving on to maybe some common family questions and something that, or maybe things that we try to answer too, but like you said earlier, sometimes it's hard for us to give a full answer unless we've also been in that situation because it's not necessarily always the side that we work.
Correct.
So what are questions that you get all the time?
The biggest thing is I try to tell the family, I give them a lot of answers. And we started a long time ago, we started with a booklet that we hand out.
Yeah.
And that booklet really has become important to us because it's like a brochure. When people walk up and I walk in a room and I go to talk to you and you're mom's died or your dad's died or your husband or wife's died, you don't remember anything that I
Yeah,
say.
they don't even remember your name.
They
Yeah.
and we know that because they're, they have that 1,000-yard stare and
Mhm.
they're trying to
The trauma
grieve
response, yeah.
and all this stuff that happens. So they, a lot of times I will give them that information, like where to obtain the death certificate. That's a big thing.
Mhm.
How do I get a hold of the death certificate? How long does it take? How many copies? Things like that. And when I first started doing this job, I didn't think about how many copies do you need? And now I'll tell somebody what I would do is I would definitely look at getting, you know, anywhere between 5 to 10 copies of the death
Yeah.
certificate. Because number one, they can't use ours. It has to be an official copy. And a lot of people do not understand that. But if I walk in a bank and I don't have an official copy and it's stamped, it has a number and everything, they're not going to let me have anything.
Mhm.
If somebody has a cell phone, we run in a lot of times that somebody, I had a younger person that died, and the family, the cell phone company was dinging the daylights out of him because they weren't paying his bill. They didn't know how to pay the bill, number one, because they didn't know his account. They didn't know a lot of things, but they also didn't know how to shut it off
Mhm.
because they had to have that death certificate to even walk in the place, whether it be AT&T, T-Mobile, whoever, and say, "Hey, I need to shut this off. He
Yeah.
is deceased."
It comes up
And
on counts that you don't even think about exist or would need one.
exactly. So if you're doing anything like that, car companies,
Mhm.
you have a loan, home mortgage companies, all this stuff, you can go and become the executor of the state, but if you don't have documentation to send these people, you have nothing.
Yeah.
So, uh, the banks are number one. Then you look at any type of benefits they're getting, retirement. If they are uh, at a retirement place in their life and the husband dies and the wife's still alive, then she has to have that death certificate to send to the retirement board. A classic example is that's when my dad died. When my dad died, um, with the railroad, my mother got a pension, my dad got a pension. When he died, her pension stopped
Mhm.
and she got his pension, but she lost money by any means. But in turn, to do all that, we had to make sure that we were able to send a death certificate over and get that approved and all that stuff to get that stopped. And so when you look at number of death certificates, I always tell everybody you need to get 5 or 10, but talk to the funeral home because that's their side of it.
Yeah. They know
Uh,
way more about it than we do.
exactly. And they can help a lot of times with life insurance. There's so many people that I think somebody has a policy, but then they don't.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little more about the life insurance thing here in a few minutes, but all that becomes very important when it comes to needing that death certificate.
Mhm. So those questions that kind of answers, maybe some mistakes that families might make, not ordering enough or not knowing um, what companies would need it, stuff like that. But also, with you talking about maybe death certificates getting rejected and stuff on your end, what happens if one has made it past all the check marks, but something is wrong on that death certificate?
Then it has to be amended. And we are allowed to amend a death certificate only so many things. So if the whole bottom is messed up, then we've got a real problem.
Yeah.
But if we have to amend one or two things on a death certificate, I have to go in, there's a form to fill out. And so I fill out what is there now. And then I have to put on there what is there, what should be put in there. And I've did that. The problem is that still has to go to vital statistics. Once it goes to vital statistics, they'll say right on their paper it can take up to 3 months to amend that death certificate. So it takes quite a while. Well, then you have two death certificates out there.
Mhm.
You have a death certificate that the funeral home got, they gave the family, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute. And if they don't collect all those, then it runs into the fact of you have two different death certificates out there trying to do two different things.
Mhm.
So that's a big thing that if that death certificate is like that, and I'll give a classic example. I told you probably 2 or 3 shows ago when we were talking that I hardly ever put
Yeah.
pending on a death certificate. I put pending on a death certificate. I had to get a guy out of this country into another country. He was autopsied, so it was taking a while. And so I was like, okay, I got to get this figured out. So they asked me to put pending. I did. Then once that happened and it got done, the family was calling because what I had to do then was I had to go in and I had to amend 4 or 5 things on that death certificate. Well, that takes months now for that to get redone,
Hmm.
sent out again, and then for the family to get that death certificate all in another country to deal with. I would have much rather, if I could have got it done, I would have much rather kept him long enough to where this happened, and then they wouldn't have had to had an amended death certificate because you're talking months.
Yeah. So back to what you were talking about earlier, kind of with the medical coding and everything. Why is it so important for those statistics to be tracked? And is it like a county per county thing with different types of deaths?
A lot of times it's county per county. They break it down into so much. So it goes state, it goes national,
Hmm.
and those codes are just like any other medical coding. There's a code for homicide, there's a code for suicide, there's a code for a natural death, but then there's also codes for what those are, whether it be a heart attack, whether it be a respiratory failure, whether it be diabetes. If when you go to sign a death certificate out, it'll say right on the top that diabetes is something that is very underreported
Hmm.
because they know they have thousands and thousands of people, if not millions of people that are diabetics. But putting that on a death certificate now becomes very much importance to a
Hmm.
lot of people just to track that. That helps with disease control. It helps with when you look at the CDC pulling records and pulling different things about that, all that becomes so important. And funding is at the top of the game.
Hmm.
If you look at all of the opioid abatement money that is out there in every state now, and Kentucky, I forget what the figure was, it was way in the millions. How did they get that? They got that by using our statistics.
Hmm.
And in turn, that the way they divvied that money up was those statistics. If you did your statistics correctly, of course, they were counties that got a whole lot more money than other counties. And that'll continue for years to come because of that reason.
Hmm.
So statistics are very, very important when it comes to writing that.
And something that really I didn't even maybe think of from this side of it or this point of view is people searching for like family histories and genealogy and things like that. If your great great grandpa died from a heart attack or that myocardial infarction was on that death certificate, that's going to come up when you run your genes to say that, there's possibility you have heart conditions or this was in your family.
Well, and the neat thing about it is even with death certificates and people out doing genealogy and also even people trying to find loved ones.
Yeah.
We live in an era as far as the whole country. It's not just in Kentucky or in Boyd County. It's the whole situation that people don't know where people's at.
Hmm.
There are so many people that just walk away and they
Yeah.
walk away and they're never found. And I've had a couple of cases. There's a guy that we ended up burying in the county cemetery because we could not find family. He lived at a hotel here. He bounced between Ashland and Huntington, and he ended up being deceased over here in our jurisdiction. So we got him, and there was nothing. And I'm sure this guy, the way everybody talked, he had money in a bank
Hmm.
account, all that stuff. Probably we kept him in our cooler a couple of months, and then we ended up burying him. And once we did that, probably 6 months later, I had a phone call, and the phone call come from the guy's son. And the reason he called was he had always he was the beneficiary of his dad's death certificate or his dad's death. He was
Hmm.
a life insurance policy, and the life insurance policy lapsed like 6 months into this. So he had paid it up that long, which
Yeah.
means he had life insurance when he died. and that person lived up north, like up in New Hampshire, up that way. Hadn't seen their dad in forever, hadn't talked to him in forever, and truly had no idea he was down in here. And he's tried to want to exhume his body a couple of times, but honestly, it was so much money to exhume it and all the expense that he would have to pay that he decided to leave him here.
Mhm.
We've had, uh, and people go through Find a Grave, findagrave.com or whatever it is on the internet. You can type that in and type somebody's name, and it will tell them where they're buried at. And that becomes important because we have had cases to where we place people in the county cemetery because of no family or we can't find family. And in turn, that's happened.
Mhm.
We've been able to do that.
Yeah.
And they find them on Find a Grave, and the next thing we know, we get a phone call. Well, we didn't know he died. What, when did he die or when did she die and things like that. So the death certificates become really important to make sure everything's right when it comes to that stuff too. What cemetery they're placed in,
Yeah.
all that matters.
Yeah. The more detail, the better.
Yes.
That's why all the demographics are so important. Wow. It's really interesting.
Now you learn something.
Okay, so maybe some rapid fire questions to kind of close it out. Can you get more copies once you've already said your like set number to the funeral home?
You can. You can go on to Vital Statistics, Kentucky Vital Statistics, if it's in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
You can put in the person's name, when they died, and it'll come up and you pay X number of dollars and they will send those to you totally online.
Mm-hmm.
You can also go to the funeral home of where that person was taken care of, and the funeral director there can order you more death certificates. So either way, you can obtain death certificates.
Can the cause of death change on a death certificate?
Very much so. I told you earlier we're working a case now
Yeah.
that we may change a death certificate that goes all the way back into 1980
Yeah.
because of new evidence and new things that we've heard and seen and have proof of now. So when that happens, you can always change the death certificate.
Mm-hmm. How long should the family keep a death certificate copy?
I would keep a death certificate forever. If you have a safety deposit box or you have a safe or anything like that, I would make sure that at least one, if not multiple copies, are kept forever.
So there's an extra copy that you should keep in mind that you need to order. You know, say you need 7, then you want 8, so you always have one on hand.
Yeah, and you never know what's going to come up. And not only that, I was able, and this has been probably 2 or 3 years ago, to finally see copies of death certificates of my grandfather and my grandmother. I'd never seen those before. My problem was they had, because you could either type a death certificate or write on a death certificate what the cause of death was. Doctor had wrote on there, you couldn't hardly even read it.
He was a doctor.
And he was a doctor. That's why.
Doctor's handwriting.
And so in turn, I was sitting there trying to figure out what it said. And it was hard. And I finally made it out. But it was
Yeah.
interesting that I was able to see that
Yeah.
because that goes way, way back.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty interesting when you saw stuff like that. So I would always recommend to always keep a death certificate.
And lastly, who can obtain a certified copy of a death certificate?
Anybody. You can go online, and if you know the name and you know when they died, you can pretty much obtain a death certificate. Now, it's the same, it falls under open records. And with open records request, after a case is closed, then anybody's entitled to obtain that. If you come to our office, you need to know when they died, you need to know the name. Those are the two big things. And what we can give you is a copy of the death certificate, which will say draft on it. It's not going to do anybody any good.
Yeah.
You can obtain a copy of toxicology. You can obtain a copy of the coroner's report. You're not entitled to pictures. You're not entitled to video. You're not entitled to anything like that under Kentucky law, which is good.
Yeah.
And so, because we've had people push that issue, and so that helps out a lot. So that's what you can obtain and how you can obtain it.
So a death certificate is way more than people may seem and can really kind of change things around in terms of accounts or even just family history and things like that, kind of what we just finished on talking about.
And the big thing is and hopefully people now this kind of debunks some myths that they have,
Mhm.
or they now understand better how a death certificate works and how it works to their advantage and why they need to keep copies of it and everything and
Yeah.
how many to order, things like that, because people don't know. They're at their worst moments
Yeah.
and they have no clue.
Yeah.
So hopefully this helps them.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you guys really enjoyed listening today. It was a good listen, kind of informative, especially kind of it's one of those things that you just don't think about until you're faced with it. So make sure you're following us on social medias. Stay tuned for all the episodes to drop. Keep liking and sharing our page, and stay tuned for the next one.
Thank you.